Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I've got a book series review for you, and it is The Arc of Scythe, or Scythe, by Neal Shusterman. So obviously I've only got the second two books in the series here with me, but I've read them both, read all three since probably about February this year. So I thought I would do a full series review, as I pretty much stormed through these last two books really quickly, and I thought I would let you guys know my thoughts. So I know when the first book in this series came out, which is just called Scythe, that it kind of blew up on BookTube, and it was really sort of well loved, or widely spoken about anyway. And I brought the first book in the series a couple of years ago, and it just sat on my TBR and sat on my bookshelf, and I think it went from Stoke to London, and I'd not read it. And I read it at the beginning of this year and really enjoyed it. And so when I came back to Stoke during lockdown, I brought the second book in the series, which is The Thunderhead, and in a little mini book haul, which I think was on my channel. And then after I read this, I think I still had Amazon Prime, so I then ordered The Holl, which is the third book. And this series is set in a world where humans created an AI called the Thunderhead, which basically runs the world. And we've kind of conquered death, and humans don't die of natural causes or accidents and things like that. And if someone does die, you know, if there is an accident, or they splat, so they jump off a building or something, not to kill themselves, just to see what it feels like, they then just get brought back to life. But then balance out the world and the population, they have this thing called Scythes, who are professional killers, who have a quota, so that obviously the population doesn't reach a certain amount, or too much for the world to bear. And the Scythe and the Thunderhead cannot interact. So the Scythe is the one group that Thunderhead does not control or does not have access to, and the Thunderhead and so the Scythe is extraordinarily human in a world where humanity is very different, and the flaws of humanity do not really exist in the same way as they do now. The Scythe is very human, it's very political and power driven. And so that's kind of where the story begins. And then a Scythe takes on two apprentices rather than one, and it kind of goes from there, and we are thrown into this very political world of power and the old guard and the new guard, and all that sort of thing. And book two kind of starts off where book one left off, and then this book three kind of starts off where book two finishes, but kind of starts off 3 years later. So what I would say about this series is I love book one and book two. Book three, on the other hand, not so much. So I did enjoy it, it was good, it just was not as good. And what I found was book three felt extraordinarily disjointed. So book three has, rather than just one or two perspectives, has like so many different people going on, so many different things going on, that you're not quite sure what's going on. And it kind of spans, rather than spanning over a short time period, it's like a couple of months or a year, which is what the first two books do. Book three, I think, spans over like 5 years, but is pretty much the same size. So this one's book three, so it is a little bit bigger, but it's not like spectacularly bigger, and it spans over a much bigger time period. Which again makes it a little bit like confusing, and it adds in some instances where there's like the AI talking to another AI, and like what it's doing with, where is it? I'll see if I can show you. Like one AI is kind of testing another AI. You can see that, so they're like having a conversation with each other, and you don't really know how this is playing into things. And then it's sort of the end of, or halfway through, or the end of book two. So within this world, we know that this sort of religious group exists, and halfway through book two, they kind of become a bit more prevalent. And then in book three, we then get excerpts of like their like holy teachings, and then multiple people dissecting them. But again, that and the conversations of the AI are not necessarily put in relation to what you've just read or you're about to read. They're kind of I feel like they're put in a bit ad hoc. You know, they're obviously not, because they're kind of weaving into the story, but it feels a bit disjointed in book 3, which for me felt quite disappointing, because I absolutely love book 1 and book 2. Like, they're so good, and I think these characters are so strong. And one thing that's really great about this series is that gender is there, but at the same time it's so like not important. So people aren't put in as like the boy wonder or the guy that's going to save the world, or you know, things like that. And it's a really interesting way of doing it, actually. And it's also quite, so this, when the Scythes become Scythes or Scythes, I had a conversation, I was talking about this when I did my book haul featuring this book, featuring Thunderhead, that with my dyslexia I really struggle how to like pronounce Scythe or Scythe, how it's pronounced. So I do apologise if I'm doing that wrong. But when they become that, they change their name into something new, and it's really also quite interesting to see the parallels between now and then. So like one of them is Scythe Marie Curie, one of them was Frida Kahlo, one was Cleopatra, one was Prometheus, one was like Jimi Hendrix, and that's very interesting to see how they then view our world and well-known names from our world. And it's very interesting also to see the dynamics with the Thunderhead, who is the AI who basically runs the world, and how they managed to some part of our world now managed to build this AI that runs the world so justly and fairly, as well. And it's so interesting. It's so interesting, and I think it's a very new concept that I'd not heard before, so I enjoyed it. And what I also really enjoyed about this series is that all of the books are currently out. Because one of my biggest pet peeves is reading a book, or reading like the first 2 books in a series, falling in love, and then not being able to finish it because the next book's not coming out for 3 years or something, which happens to me quite regularly. So what I also liked was that I could just binge, especially the books 2 and 3. I read them back to back. But it is really enjoyable, and the main characters that we have, and the main characters kind of change. So in a similar way that Sarah J Maas does it, that as you go through and different characters become more prevalent, there are different main characters that weave in throughout the series. We kind of start out with Rowan and Citra. Citra, is that how you pronounce her name? I've read like 3 other books since this series. Citra, yeah. So Rowan and Citra are like the first 2. Shouting outside. Rowan and Citra are like the first 2 main characters. They're the first 2 apprentices, and it's really interesting to hear that what their stories. They are like the main 2 who, not including like the main villain, that flow through all 3 books, but there are other people that come up, and it's really interesting to see their development and how they go from like basically scared kids to adults, which is cool. And it's just a really, I say, it's really novel and unique world that I'd not really seen before, of the Scythes, and how they are like trained to kill people, but different Scythes have their own methods and their own morality and ethics around that. And it does bring up a lot of questions of morality and ethics in a world where people can't die, where illness doesn't exist, where climate change doesn't exist. It's just so, like, obviously so opposite to our world in that sense, especially with everything going on currently. It's like, oh, this is really interesting, but it is quite fast, especially the first 2 books. Very well, the third book is also very fast paced because there's so much going on, that you kind of don't want to stop reading, which I didn't, especially the second book and going into the third book. Like, I was like, I do not want to stop reading this. I just want to keep reading because I want to know what's going to happen to these people, like good or bad, because there's multiple points where the bad guys are winning. Well, the bad guys are really really kind of winning, and you're like, how is this going to get turned around, and who is this going to get turned around by, and in what direction is this going to get turned around, and is somebody going to come up off left field? And what I found was reading, especially in the third book, reading this book, I was asking so many questions and had so many different ideas of where it could go. I mean, I was totally wrong of where this was going. But it was just so interesting. And it actually ends at a point where I'm like, I want to know what happens next, because there's some characters that just form a relationship and then it ends and you're like, I want to know what's going to happen here. And then there's some characters who, like, you're just like, I want to know where this is going to go next. And obviously we don't, and I don't think it's going to go, I don't think they're going to do like a 4th book or like a novella carrying it on or anything, but it kind of leaves a lot of question marks. Like the ending, I found the ending of this very satisfying. it was the leading up to the ending and the way that the third book was written that was a little bit like, oh, this feels very disjointed and difficult and a bit annoying. But overall, I really enjoyed it. So I've now been like rambling for 10 minutes, but that's my little review of The Art of Scythe by Neal Shusterman. I say I've only got the second two books here, but I really enjoyed this and really recommend this. I think if you're into fantasy, if you're into things that are a bit futuristic, maybe even a bit dystopian, worlds that are set in our world but very different, sort of technology, a lot of politics, then I think you'll enjoy this. As I say, you kind of have to brace yourself going into the third book because it kind of, the pace is a bit different and it feels very different. You're a bit unsure at points about like what's going on in sort of how it's written, not necessarily the storyline. But it is a cracking series. I really enjoyed it, and as I say, all the 3 books are out, which always for me is a big plus if at least half the series or the whole series is out, because then you can kind of just get on with it rather than having to wait a few years. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please remember to like and subscribe if you did. I try and put videos up at least once a week, if not once every 2 weeks, and I love reading. If you go back on my channel, you'll see so much book and reading content. So if you did enjoy this, please do feel free to go back and see what else I've got on my channel. If you read this series, please let me know in the comments what you thought. I would love to hear what you thought about the book, what you thought about the ending. If you felt the same about book 3 as I did, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please remember to like and subscribe if you did, and I hope you have an amazing day. Bye.